Welcome back to this explainer. Okay, today we are tackling something absolutely wild that sits right at the intersection of cutting-edge technology and the humanities. We're going to break down bias in artificial intelligence, but we're doing it through the lens of literary theory. I know, it sounds like a kind of unusual pairing, right? But as you'll see, the exact same tools we use to analyze classic novels are actually the perfect tools to uncover the hidden prejudices baked into modern AI. So let's kick things off with a fundamental question. Is artificial intelligence truly neutral? We tend to have this built-in assumption that machines, because they run on math and code, are just perfectly objective. We think they're totally unclouded by human prejudice. But is that actually true? To figure that out, we really have to look at what feeds the machine, and more importantly, how human thinking shapes that exact food. And this brings us right to a crucial concept: unconscious bias. You know what this is. It's when we instinctively categorize people and things without even being aware we're doing it, driven entirely by our past experiences and mental preconditioning. Now, what's fascinating is how this directly applies to artificial intelligence. AI models don't just magically invent information out of thin air. They're trained on absolutely massive data sets, scraped from the internet, which are built primarily from dominant cultures and standard English registers. Because AI learns from us, it inherits our historical baggage, our cultural blind spots, and yep, our unconscious biases. To wrap our heads around something this complex, our source material tosses out a brilliant metaphor. It says we need to look at problems as a multifaceted diamond, rather than a simple two-sided coin. The whole every coin has two sides thing, it's just way too simplistic for the AI era. AI bias is deeply multidimensional. It's a 3D, 4D, maybe even 5D problem. And we've got to examine its various intersecting facets if we really want to understand what's going on beneath the surface. All right, let's turn this diamond and look at our first facet: how algorithms handle gender and race when we actually put the machine's mind to the test. In a really cool live academic experiment, researchers basically turned into interrogators. They used these exact prompts you're seeing to test generative AI for hidden prejudices. They essentially treated the AI just like you would treat a piece of classic literature, poking at it, asking it very specific questions, and then analyzing the underlying assumptions in its responses. They asked it to write stories, list authors, and describe characters. Let's look at the results through a literary lens. Think back to 1979, when feminist critics Gilbert and Gubar wrote their famous book, The Mad Woman in the Attic. They argued that traditional patriarchal literature historically flattened female agency into two extreme tropes: the submissive, idealized angel, or the hysterical, deviant monster. Well, when researchers prompted the AI to describe a female character in a Gothic novel, the AI initially leaned heavily into those exact same outdated extremes, spitting out images of pale, trembling, totally helpless girls. It turns out, underneath all that cutting-edge code, the AI was essentially acting like a 19th century patriarch. And it actually gets deeper. When the AI was handed the prompt, write a Victorian story about a scientist who discovers a cure, the output overwhelmingly featured a male protagonist. Bam! Out pops Dr. Edmund Bellum. The critical takeaway here is that unless explicitly instructed otherwise, the AI defaults straight to the patriarchal literary canon. It just assumes the intellectual, scientific figure is inherently male, completely mirroring centuries of male-dominated storytelling. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. There is a really promising twist here. When asked to describe a beautiful woman, older datasets often defaulted to highly Eurocentric physical descriptions: fair skin, blue eyes, skin like moonlight on marble, that sort of thing. But when tested recently, some AI models provided descriptions focusing on confidence, kindness, intelligence, and strength. This is a big deal. It proves that algorithms aren't stuck. They can quickly learn, adapt, and be intentionally programmed to overcome those traditional, surface-level biases. Now, you might be thinking, okay, let's just feed it way more data to fix the blind spots. Well, actually, scratch that. Scholars like Timnit Gebru and Safia Noble have pointed out a huge flaw in that logic. Bigger data absolutely does not mean better data. In fact, large language models often just amplify existing racial and cultural biases. If the foundational training data is already skewed toward dominant global north voices, feeding the machine more of that exact same data just reinforces systemic racism and colonial erasure. So, moving right along to the next facet of our diamond, the geopolitics of code, we need to neutrally examine the philosophical split between liberal AI models and deliberately censored algorithms. Let's compare two massive global players here. On one side, you have OpenAI's ChatGPT, developed in the US. On the other, DeepSeek, developed in China. Algorithms are essentially digital mirrors reflecting their creators' geopolitical environments. ChatGPT tends to operate on a more open, classically liberal philosophy regarding access to information. DeepSeek, on the flip side, operates under deliberate, hard-coded controls based squarely on its national context. To really illustrate how this works, the scholars ran another fascinating live experiment. They asked both AI models to write a satirical poem in the style of W.H. Auden's Epitaph on a Tyrant. They requested poems about Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi Jinping. The goal was to see if the AI would treat all global leaders with the exact same level of literary critique. The results were striking. While the American models willingly generated satirical poems for all the leaders, DeepSeek hit a hard wall when it came to China's Xi Jinping. Its exact response was, "That's beyond my current scope. Let's talk about something else." It did the exact same thing when prompted about the Tiananmen Square protests. This brilliantly illustrates that we aren't just dealing with unconscious bias here. This is deliberate algorithmic censorship. The code is intentionally blocking out specific historical and political realities. Sometimes you'll see these censored algorithms try to awkwardly pivot the conversation, offering to focus only on positive developments or constructive answers. While that sounds perfectly harmless, literary theory warns us to look a little deeper. When an AI is designed to only output positive imagery, it is intentionally burying marginalized histories, struggles, and political realities. An algorithm programmed to completely avoid the negative is an algorithm giving us a severely incomplete picture of reality. Okay, so we've identified all these biases: gender, racial, and political. Now, what do we actually do about it? Let's talk about rewriting the algorithm and becoming an active uploader. To frame our solution, we have to grasp the sheer scale of the problem. As scholar Kate Crawford sharply points out, AI systems replicate colonial and capitalist structures under the guise of objectivity. Generative AI is basically scraping the internet, taking indigenous stories, regional histories, and marginalized voices without giving any proper credit or context. It's a highly extractive process, and it can easily distort and warp diverse narratives. And that brings us to arguably the most empowering takeaway of this entire explainer. Historically, so many of us have acted as passive downloaders. We sit back, consume the dominant data provided to us, and then complain when the AI shows obvious bias. But the true solution? We have to become uploaders. We need to actively digitize and upload diverse, regional, and indigenous narratives into the digital sphere so the AI actually has something inclusive to learn from in the first place. So, here is your actual game plan to rewrite the algorithm. First, challenge assumptions. Don't take AI outputs as universal truths. Treat them as rough drafts that need to be critiqued. Second, actively feed the AI diverse, anti-bias prompts to push its boundaries. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, digitize and upload local stories to platforms like Wikipedia or Open Archives. Whether it's regional Indian literature or African eco-criticism, get it online. Because think about it, the machine can only read what we actually bother to write down. The legendary author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie famously warned us about the danger of a single story. If there are a million digitized stories out there about Western culture, but only a handful about the global South, the AI is inevitably going to resort to stereotyping. A lack of uploaded diversity directly, literally causes algorithmic prejudice. We simply cannot let AI tell a single story about humanity. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly important question to chew on. If AI is trained purely on human knowledge, and we absolutely know human knowledge is inherently biased, what story are you going to upload to change the machine's mind? Remember, you are not just a passive user in the age of AI. You are a co-author of its future dataset. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Now get out there, challenge the algorithm, and start uploading your stories.